Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I'm your host, Eva Andrade. I'm here with Marcus Oshiro, and we're going to be letting Marcus air out some of his deep thoughts regarding the Navahine versus Hawaii Department of Transportation case. And this was a case that brought together 13 young plaintiffs. Many of them are Native Hawaiian. And they argued that the state's transportation policies were violating their constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. So we're going to chat about that. Marcus.
Yes.
All right. Now you have to put on your retired attorney's hat.
Okay.
Because you're going to have to walk us through this case because you found it very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I would wager that many of our listeners and viewers probably have no idea what this case was about. So let's do this. Why don't you give us a quick overview of the Navahine case and why it's considered to be
this is a
landmark?
really interesting case because it's a first of its kind, I think, in the nation, where you've had a group of um, younger people getting involved as plaintiffs, 13 of them, many Native Hawaiian, to bring a lawsuit against the state, in this case, State of Hawaii Department of Transportation. And the allegations and the charges was that they were violating their right under the Hawaii State Constitution to a clean, healthy environment for themselves and posterity going down the road. And that was filed, I think, in 2022, I believe. And they reached a settlement with the state DOT in 2024, a settlement agreement between the state of Hawaii, Department of Transportation, and the plaintiffs. And in that settlement, it covers a range of activities and responsibilities and milestones and benchmarks for the state DOT, Department of Transportation, to meet over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to honor the settlement terms and conditions. It's going to be monitored by the circuit court until such time that there's compliance and that court releases jurisdiction over the case.
Well,
So it's going to be a while.
okay, so
Yeah.
a lot of people are not legal and they
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think legally. So because it was a settlement rather than
Yeah.
a court ruling,
Yeah.
how does that affect enforcement?
Well, it has the same effect as if the court went to a hearing, went to a trial, and found for the 13 plaintiffs and held against the state of Hawaii for violating the state constitution. And I tell people it's interesting about this case. What I found was interesting is that these are all minors. These are not adults. These are below 18. So I want to give a shout out to the young people being activists, being radical, because that's what I was when I was growing up. I was counterculture. I was radical. Pushing. Pushing against the man. And I'm glad they did it in a good way. Using the laws, using the process, using the procedures to advance their interests. For themselves, their contemporaries, and posterity, the future.
That you make such a good point, and I want to do that too. I want to make sure that if you're a young person, that you do have a right to raise your voice. And this is another example. Not only can you raise your voice legislatively and get down there and argue against bills or for bills that happen at the Capitol, you can also raise your voice in our court system, and this is a great example of that.
Yeah. So I think it was maybe Moriwaki from the one of the nonprofit legal groups that was actually advancing as far as attorneys to appear before the court and bring the lawsuit. But again, it was a citizen of the state of Hawaii, not an adult, a minor who had standing to go into court and bring claims. And then what's interesting about it is that the judge at the time was Judge, I think, Crabtree. He's been around a long time, experienced civil judge in the First Circuit, well respected. well, I respect him a lot, but he retired. But anyway, he was the one that ran through and read through all of the motions or the requests to the court to dismiss the case, maybe for standing or legitimacy or the arguments being made. And he said they're legitimate, and the Constitution says what it says, and my job as the court is to enforce that.
Well, okay, and let's talk about that because in the ruling, or it wasn't a ruling, and it
This is yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So he's telling the state now they have to decarbonize all this stuff, and
yeah,
they're giving them to like 2045 to make it
yeah.
happen. So is this a realistic timeline? You think they're going to be able to do this?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's why right now, as we sit here this afternoon, that I think they have until the end of August. They're doing listening sessions. They're going out to the community,
Oh, good.
the state DOT through its director, Ed Sniffen, and his team is going out there listening to the community and saying, these are some of the ideas we have, talking to the experts in this area, carbon emissions and you know, transportation effects and everything else, costs, etc. But we want to hear from the community.
That is so
And so that's
awesome.
going on right now. And then, you know, of course, the court is there to oversee the process, to make sure it's fair for both sides, plaintiffs and defendants. If the parties agree that maybe they can't meet these deadlines or they can't, you know, accelerate it or advance this far enough, they can always go to the court in agreement to ask the court to change some of the terms and conditions and remedies that have been imposed upon them.
So it was the Youth Climate Council that played a big role in developing
Yes.
this policy.
Yeah.
And so those listening may still not understand what was it that they said is the problem, or what was the groundbreaking reason to do this court case?
You know, a lot of it is based upon, let's go back 20 years or so, you know, with Al Gore's monumental breakthrough book, movie, Inconvenient Truth, that kind of set the whole discourse or conversation on what's happening with climate change or the effects of climate change, whatever the reason might be, right? That was 20 years ago now. And we're saying, like, you know, storms and temperatures and monsoon patterns and tornadoes and hurricanes and all the effects of something going on in there, right? Whatever you call it. But the idea is that here we are in Hawaii, we have a right as to our constitution to make sure that we have a healthy, nurturing environment around us.
Which would mean what?
That means the air, that means the soil, that means the water, then every all the living conditions within the state of Hawaii that mean something to us, that we treasure, and it's basically the idea of public trust. No
Mm,
one owns it. The
right.
government doesn't own it. The private sector doesn't own it.
We're stewards.
We're stewards. We're only passing through this period of
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and you know there's some biblical relationship to that whole notion about being stewards, right? You know, to care for what we have, what we've been given, to pass it on to the next generation. We can't exploit, use it all
Right.
now.
Right.
I think about the next generations, how they will, have water and land and clean air. So that's part of the whole thing. So under this doctrine of public trust, we all have a responsibility, and the court is there to enforce it.
Okay, so you said some magic words. I know some people's minds are thinking when you talk about public trust, I know that there are people immediately going, "Oh, it's going to cost me some kala." So there's going to be some costs to all of this. So lawmakers are going to be concerned about the cost to residents, right? Especially those within the means, right, to afford these electronic vehicles and and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's one of the major concerns is that let's say that okay, so let's say that 50% of the carbon emissions in Hawaii annually it comes from transportation. So that's cars, right? That's highways, freeways, cars, trucks, motorcycles, EVs on the road. Okay, that's part of the emissions. And then you have another component. You have inter-island Matson. You got going back and forth. Young Brothers. That's part of it too. And then you have airplanes like Aloha Airlines or, flying between islands. So those are the three components.
And we kind of need airplanes to go between islands unless you can get on a boat and you know what happened to the super ferry.
Yeah, yeah, they got seasick. Yeah. So you have but that's about 50% of the carbon emissions comes from there. Another 30% is from energy generation. So those are your power plants. And they both biofuel, diesel fuel, um, you know, other types of petroleum product or carbon emissions, right? But we're focusing just on transportation. So transportation affects everyone here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether you're driving or whether you're a business or
Try
whether,
walk. Go. Try walk.
yeah, okay. So one of the ideas is to try and get a reduction in carbon emissions. So EV, electrical vehicles. Well, there's a cost component, right? Electrical vehicles cost
Mm-hmm.
more normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people cannot afford electrical vehicle, a Tesla.
And you know what most people don't talk about too?
Yeah.
The cost of once that car breaks down and that battery needs to be replaced
Yeah,
and all that, the cost is astronomical.
it is
So
astronomical.
you
And then,
buy the car and then yeah.
we can talk about this.
Yeah.
Why does we inject this? One of the
Yeah.
things of electrical vehicle, I think we need to be cognizant about. If we're going to be thinking locally or acting locally, thinking globally, is the sourcing of those lithium batteries.
Yes.
Where do those rare minerals come from? What countries do these rare minerals come from? Lithium, cobalt, nickel. Where did they come from? Well, they come from Africa, right? Africa, maybe China or South America, right? Who's going to extract them? What does that mean for the environments of those areas?
Hasn't there been some discussion that it's been children in some of these
It
places?
has been children, and it has been.
Because they have to fit in small places
That's
and
right,
all of that.
and
Yeah.
because they're mistreated and exploited, but that's how they earn a living and get their bowl of porridge, right? So
Right.
if we
Right.
understand, the chain of where these resources coming from, how they process everything, we also got to think about that too. Good for us on this side, receiving in the United States of America to have these EVs, but each of the component parts come from someplace. And then is also the fact that we have never calculated the cost,
Right.
the energy
Right.
cost to produce a vehicle like
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk does. Right?
So how do you balance that? So I guess that's the
So
question people ask. How do you balance that? Because on one hand, they can give you a million reasons why this is the way to go. And then on the other hand, it's gonna hurt a lot of
yeah, well,
people
that's where for me I look at kind of on a holistically and a bigger. So 1.5 million, we get maybe 9-10 million visitors a year. Okay, so how much carbon do we produce compared to the rest of the states? It's a small amount. Where does the carbon go? Well, it goes down south most of it because of the trade winds, right? Prevailing trade winds blow it away from us.
right.
So it's not really situated, staying with us. It goes away. Where does it go? Does it go out? No, it stays in the global atmosphere. So the same carbon we produce and we emit, from our vehicles is the same carbon emissions that's coming from China or India or from Detroit
What you mean
or
it doesn't
Pennsylvania or from
disappear?
Florida or from Texas. They're emitting this stuff too now. So you got to think about, okay, so we're going to be making some changes, big policy changes, and we're going to be forcing the cost upon us people for these policies, which,
And there's
yeah,
so much meat in here, Marcus. I know we're probably not gonna be able to
yeah,
cover
yeah.
everything, but so what is there going to be unintended consequences though regarding like the tourist industry? And I mean,
Well, yeah, well, the tourist guys are going to face the thing right now with the cruise ships, right? Because we
right,
had that new green
right, right,
tax, right,
right,
coming
right,
on
right,
them,
right.
right?
Exactly.
So there's probably a lawsuit being prepped right now as we speak, but that's additional cost that's going to be imposed upon them. And again, are we trying to address the effect of carbon emissions in our state, in our waters, in our air, in our land, or are we trying to address something bigger than us? And that's why you talked about the global climate accords that started in France, right, several years ago, because you got to think about it globally, because we're like in one big globe, right? One glass bottle here, and
You're
the gas goes everywhere,
I know
right?
what it is you're talking to people that live here in this beautiful state of Hawaii, and a lot of times we don't think about this because our air. I mean, we don't think about the air, but our air seems much, better than the
We
mainland.
don't have the problems that a
Right.
lot of mainland states have, or the effects of the Canadian wildfires, to the north of us. We're blessed to live in Hawaii because we have the prevailing trade winds 85% of the time. Once in a while, we get Kona,
And then we get the VOG,
they get the
and then
fog
everybody's
and
nose
humid
start
and
getting all
nose
stuff.
itchy
Yeah, yeah,
nose,
yeah.
but for the most part,
Yeah.
I think part of the equation and the discussion we should have honestly amongst ourselves, okay, yeah, we understand that this we need to make some changes. These are some good things we need to do. But how do you apportion the cost? Because I've always looked at people can afford photovoltaic systems like that seem to be on the higher
Right.
end or the income level of other people.
Hmm.
Homeowners, that's one thing. And they have the means to get the benefits of photovoltaic solar batteries. Many people out there don't have that advantage or the ability to do that. So I'm trying to figure out how can we kind
And
of,
let's be honest, some just don't want
and some of
it.
them want, right. So how do we balance
Right.
that out? And
Right.
then for people in the rural areas who have to drive from the west side to Honolulu to get to their work, or west side to Waikiki to get to their work, they're going to be disproportionately affected. They can be if it's on the fuel tax or the amount of mileage on the road, or what kind of fuel they put into their vehicles.
Let's pull this home for a second because you were in the legislature for over 20 years. What kind of the legislature must have been talking about this, and I mean, I know that there's been a lot of changes in the way that we do business or whatever, but this has to be part of what you guys have been discussing on the legislative level already.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is not a new discussion. This
Right.
has been a discussion that's going on for many years.
Is this one of those partisan things though? Is this an issue where the Democrats care more than the Republicans, or has this been a bipartisan issue,
I gotta be
in
honest.
your
I
opinion?
gotta be honest about it. I think it has been somewhat driven by the Democrats, maybe more progressive thinking, or more environmentally friendly, or sensitive. I think them, but I think the reality where we're dealing with today, because of this lawsuit and the court's oversight of what we're going to be doing with our state DOT over the next 20, 30 years, we all got to pay attention to it.
Well, wasn't represent our late wonderful representative Gene Ward? He cared about this kind of stuff, if I'm not mistaken, right? Wasn't he one of the Republicans that would actually have these
No, he
discussions?
did, because he was thinking about the future. He was thinking about the younger generation, what kind of lives they will live, or what we would leave to them, right? So he thought about that. But I guess now the rubber meets the road, really, and we got to figure out how do we get there in the most equitable, fair way for everyone. So it's really a cockhole thing.
Right.
We're all
Right.
involved.
Now so a couple weeks ago you were like really fired up about this issue. You were looking at about a lot of stuff. What was it about this particular issue that really got your wheels rolling?
Well, it just goes back to the whole thing about acting locally, thinking globally. But I'm thinking, how much carbon monoxide or carbon emissions do we produce, and where does it go? And if we really want to get serious about the effects of climate change in the globe, we got to deal with the big emitters, right? Like China and India and some of the industrial plants on the European continent, that are emitting all of these carbons. And they're going to tell us this: we're just doing what you guys did,
Mm.
so you can become the superpower that you are today.
Okay, I go put you on the spot, Marcus, but
I
you're
mean,
used to this. You're used to this. You're
you
not
know,
Marcus is not afraid.
yeah,
So I'm going to put you on the spot
yeah.
here. So why don't you take a moment and speak to the Republicans or those that disagree that are listening to this right now going, "Oh no, here we go. We're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not as bad as this. There are other issues that are far more important." Speak to them right now.
Well, this is a issue for the next generations, and this is a responsibility we have currently in positions of power and authority and influence, to think about the next generation. We can't go and expend all the resources for now. I mean, we got to think about the next generation. And that's part of the responsibility. So the discussion that we should be having right now is what makes sense for us in Hawaii? What makes sense given our economy? What makes sense given our conditions of our climate, our weather? What really benefits all of us? Keep in mind now that we contribute such a small amount of carbon emissions for the size of our state. And the majority of the carbon emissions are being emitted by larger countries, larger states, like Texas, Pennsylvania, Detroit, you know, heavy industry places. So I just like to have that discussion honestly, openly, and invite all of us to the table.
This is so good, Marcus. And you know what? If you're watching this right now and you disagree, again, put it in
Oh,
the
there are going to
comments.
be people.
And there's going to be people that disagree. And you know what? Maybe what we'll do in a future shows, we'll get maybe a strong Republican or someone who disagrees with you, just to
Sure.
have the discussion. Because the one thing that we all agree on is that we care about Hawaii. This is our home, and we've got to do our very best to keep Hawaii Hawaii. That has been a big thing we've talked about in many of the issues, right? In order to keep this place as beautiful as it is, we have to put some work in. And there's a conversation that has to take place.
Right.
So let's look at this issue. Let's look at it through the bigger picture frame, right? And maybe some policy outcomes. Do you think that this is going to be a way now for our youth to really get more involved with lawsuits or policy issues? Is this going to be like that thing that's going to propel more youth involvement?
I think it will, and I think it's good because I've always been one of those people that always have reminded people who are sophomores in high school that at the age of 16, under Hawaii law, you can register to vote. You can't vote until you're 18, but at 16, you can be registered to vote. So when you turn 18, you'll be sent a ballot and you'll be allowed to go and vote. And that means something because when the adults know that you can vote in 2 years, 16, 17, and you can vote at 18, they'll listen and they'll pay attention. So I want to encourage all of you young people out there, 16 years, go and register to vote, and 18, go and vote.
I am going to raise you that. So
Raise the
I don't, so
ante.
I don't, yeah, so
You're
I
gonna go all
still don't know
in.
how to, I still don't know how to gamble, but I do know that I can take what you're betting on the table and I can add to it,
Okay,
right?
add to it. Add
So
to
I'm
it.
going to add to it. So I'm saying that for you young people, not only register to vote at 16, I want you to also pay attention to what's happening at the legislature, because I will tell you that legislators will listen to you. If you show up at the Capitol and you say,
That's right.
this issue is important to
Yeah,
me, and here's
yeah.
why, more and more and more, we're seeing young people saying, we don't want you adults to screw up our future. And I remember when abortion was being debated, I was a teenager, and I'm still fighting that issue. So legislators do want to hear from you as a young person. I'm saying. So I'm
And the young people today, fortunately, have the tools. You guys have the tools. You guys got the internet. You guys got Facebook. You got Instagram. You got all Twitter. You got all this technology to get it out there. Doesn't cost a lot of money. You guys have the ingenuity to do it, and use that tools to shape the future for yourselves and your friends and your family, because it's now, right? The future is now.
All right. So going back to the issue
Okay.
itself, how does I know? Thank you. I'm glad. I don't ever want you to get off that soapbox. I love that
Sorry.
soapbox. So
Sorry.
obviously we have very unique challenges here geographically,
Sure.
right, in the state of Hawaii. So how do we reach that net zero point? Do you think we ever will?
It's gonna be really hard because I think that 30% of producing power, unless because we go and use a portion of oil to burn and produce our power plants, that's always going to be there. And the reason why is that we also have to produce jet fuel. So unless we convert to biojet fuel or something else, we're
Mm.
still going to have residual oil-based fuel that can and should be burned in our power plants. So that's part of the deal too.
So, okay, I know we're getting short on time. So
Yeah.
if you were still in the legislature, what would your three priorities be that you would focus on to ensure that families aren't left behind?
I for one would look at the infrastructure of our electrical grid and the carrying capacity.
Excellent.
And I would like to understand the contribution on maintenance of that system for all households, whether you have photovoltaic, solar cells, solar energy or not, batteries or not. Because I know that, let's say that 35, 40% of people in Hawaii are renters. They don't own their homes. They're not really getting much value when they go and make these improvements to their living conditions. So I think that's also important. And I think we need to be mindful of the people who are commuting long distances. And I'm from Wahiawa, so I'm used to that, putting in gas, like once a week to go from Honolulu to Wahiawa, Wahiawa to Honolulu. So I think we need to be sensitive to those people that have no other alternatives. And for the foreseeable future, will be putting in gasoline to get to work and to take care of their businesses.
You know what, Marcus? As you were talking, I was thinking, I know someone who lives in a condominium, and so he now participates in the condominium association meetings because they discuss this kind of stuff. If you live in a condominium, you cannot decide on your own whether you're going to have, solar panels or whatever. But if you show up to your condominium association meetings, guess what? You can listen to what they're discussing, and like things on the insurance when those insurance fees
Oh,
went off the roof.
yes.
These were being discussed in association meetings and people were unaware because they don't attend. I get it. I get it. I'm going to hear it now. I work two jobs. I don't have time to do that. Okay, then you may not be the one that can go. But I know there's somebody listening or viewing right now who does have the time. You know, you retired kupuna that are out there that your brain is still sharp and you feel like, oh Lord, I don't know what you want me to do in life. I'm telling you, go to these association meetings and raise your voice.
Yeah, you got to go to them because the AOAO are independent self-governing boards, and the membership and the board of directors wield a lot of power and authority on what happens to the collective in these living arrangements. So you got to get involved.
Oh my gosh, which reminds me of something we talked about before. Run for office in your association. They're always looking for presidents and treasurers and all that. But city council, run for city council. Marcus always says, "Why does everybody feel like the Lord is calling them to run for governor?" I mean, right? It's like we need people on the city council. We need people on neighborhood boards. Do you know that you have a lot of power if you're sitting on a neighborhood board? Right, Marcus? Go ahead. I'm tossing the ball to
You,
you.
you, you, you do. You have a disproportionate amount of authority and influence on the neighborhood board. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't need to, have a PhD or have a JD or anything like that. You just need to have a heart willing to serve. Neighborhood board is a very good place to serve your community.
All right. And that what you can do is like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know every time we upload a new video. And that's something you can do right now, right now, right now, right now. Hit that like button, hit it, hit it. And stay tuned. We got more interesting shows coming up. So we'll see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.